Are you trying to implement a leaflet map in your SvelteKit project in 2023? Maybe you got past the window is not defined error, only to realize that Leaflet originates in 2010 and looks a bit like good old jQuery. Did you already start implementing Leaflet as is and found your code to be a hybrid mess of Svelte and global scoped JavaScript that is hard to read and even harder to maintain? What if I told you there was a better way? Wouldn't it be great if you could just make it all a bit more svelte, with declarative component-based design and built-in reactivity? Let's make it so that your code ends up looking nice and clean. We'll encapsulate Leaflet's map, markers, pop-ups, and more features into so-called renderless components. These will split up the complexity and handle the ugly parts internally, leaving you with an extensible component basis that you can use in your project like any other modern library. Once you learn how to do that with the mentioned Leaflet parts, it'll be easy for you to adapt the pattern for more features, like vector shapes or raster layers if needed. We'll also make use of the Context API, which is a pretty underused feature in Svelte. It gets rid of nasty prop drilling to share data between parent components and their children in any depth. The obvious way to do that would be to use state, but state is global, while context is not. Imagine you'd persist a zoom variable of your map in global state. If you'd add more than one map to your application, all of them would subscribe to the same variable instance and react to changes. Context is component scoped. Basically, each component that sets context does so for itself, for its child components and their children. A child component can then get context to retrieve variables that are currently available for it. All right, I'll leave the bootstrap part to you. Prepare your development tools. Fire up a new SvelteKit project like you always do. Add salt, pepper, and Tailwind if needed, and let's start code cooking.
Phew, another day in the office. All right, let's see. Our client wants to integrate a leaflet map in his SvelteKit application. I'll build a component library and simple demo to show them how to use it. First, I'll create a component for the map itself. I'll call it leaflet.svelte. Let's add a simple div container inside of that component where Leaflet can render its stuff. I'll use bind this to be able to access the container in my code, and I'll also add a slot so that I can put child components like markers or pop-ups on my map later on from the outside. But before we get to that, I need to declare a JavaScript object that holds my actual map, not the rendering container. Great! Now I can initialize this object when my component is mounted. I'll import this ugly global L object from the Leaflet library and use its map function to create my object. Then I'll add a tile layer and attribute their creators like any responsible developer would do. We don't want them to sue our butts, right? Cool! Let's clean this thing up whenever my component is destroyed and we should be golden. Now here comes the fun part. I guess the child components will all need access to this map object, but I don't want to drill properties like a junior developer. I'll let the Leaflet component expose its map object using the Context API. I'll set it here, and then all children of the map can retrieve it when needed. All that's missing for now are some parameters for my map. It either needs a combination of view coordinates and a zoom level, or a bounds description, so that it knows what tiles to show initially. This is a perfect spot for a reactive expression, because whenever these parameters change, I'll have to tell Leaflet about it. Svelte is clever enough to rerun the code in the dollar expression whenever one of the if variables changes. Man, I really love Svelte. Finally! Now I can add my super-duper Leaflet component to app.html. I'm so excited. Let's see what it looks like. Fudge! SvelteKit gives me an error. Window is not defined. What the? Let's think about this. I know that SvelteKit enables server-side rendering, or SSR, by default for all pages. But Leaflet is initialized in the client when my component is mounted. This won't work. Now I know what to do. I'll create a pluspage.ts file for this page and disable SSR there. That should do the trick. Nice. Here is my map. Now that we have a map to work with, let's add some markers to it. Time to create another component. Marker.svelte. This works very similar to the map itself. We basically just define a div where Leaflet can render its shenanigans. We'll keep track of the underlying JavaScript object in the marker variable. Let's also add a slot to the marker so that we can add popups to it later. The only difference is that the marker will retrieve the map object from its parent component using the getContext function. We'll also set the marker itself as context and call it layer. This is what Leaflet calls them, and children might need to access the layer they're rendered in. You can also add multiple markers to a so-called marker group, but we don't need that now. Finally, we can simply slot markers as children of our map. We can use Svelte's template goodness, and we don't need to drill any props around. Shiny. Let's see what it looks like. Great, there's our little marker. I'm pretty sure our client wants to use custom images though, so let's add these. I want to be able to add them declaratively, so let's make use of the slot in the marker that we defined earlier. I'll just add our awesome company logo as SVG for demonstration purposes. All we need to do now is to tell Leaflet about this and pass the icon to the marker function. And voila, this looks much better already. I think we did it. We can use these patterns to implement more Leaflet features if needed. And you know what? I'm going to do another one quickly to remove all doubt. Marker pop-ups. By now you know how this works. Div container, element ref, cleanup, yada yada. Note how this time we get the parent marker as layer from context. To create the pop-up, we'll call the bind pop-up function on that particular layer. I'll also use the open and close events of the pop-up to keep track of its state in my Svelte code. We could also expose the events and/or this state to other components if we wanted to. Oh yeah, the pop-up also has a slot. This is where we'll put our content. And there it is, nice and easy. I'll leave a link to the repository in the description in case they want to adapt my code. Guess that'll do it as a first prototype. So let's ShipBit fast and get their feedback immediately. Yo boss, what's up?
Hi, I just wanted to give you some quick feedback. The client really loved your implementation. Yeah.
Do I sense a but?
Yeah, well, they said, unfortunately, that management decided to use open layers rather than Leaflet. They also prefer to rely on Angular rather than Svelte. And they would rather work with internal developers than with us. You did a really great job, though. Keep it up. Until then, feel free to play Dave the Diver a bit more.